Hello, and welcome to the Radical Fabulatorium. Okay, on today's episode, I am speaking with comedian Brent Butt. Brent's going to be out east here for a couple shows in April, hitting St. John, New Brunswick at the Imperial Theatre on April 12th. Tickets are still available for that, so go ahead and snag those. You can also check Brent out online at his website, brentbutt.com. You'll find links to all his socials, his stand-up album, Easily Distracted, his Substack, Not Exactly TV, and a bunch of other cool stuff up there, of course. All right, here we go. My chat with Brent. All right, thanks a lot for coming on the show today, Brent. I really appreciate you giving me some of your time today.
I got nothing but time. I got my feet up while we're talking here.
Nothing but time. That sounds like a pretty good way to live life.
Well, I try to convince myself that it's true, but that's the best thing to do. Sometimes the best thing in the world is to just lie to yourself, right? They tell you not to do that, but sometimes, like if you're overwhelmed, sometimes the best thing to do is go, this is nothing. I got this. Hey, I'm not that busy.
Just kick your feet up and think you're going to live forever sort of thing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's bad. You can convince yourself of stuff. We do it all the time. So why not do it for your benefit?
You're right. That's actually, that's a pretty good way to kind of find some inner peace if you need a moment to just shut down and exist.
Yeah.
So you're going to be here in town in St. John, New Brunswick on April 12th at the Imperial Theatre.
That's great news.
That's fantastic. Yeah. First you're hearing it, I imagine.
Yeah.
Have you played that room before, that theater before?
I have.
Yeah, it's a beautiful theater.
I have, yes. Beautiful theater.
Now, while you're out east, you'll be hitting Halifax and 2 shows in Yarmouth. So that must mean you have pretty big demand down in Yarmouth, of all places.
I'm hot as a pistol in Yarmouth. They can't get enough of me in Yarmouth.
Yeah. I thought that was great. So people probably taking the Digby ferry to get to make it for another show down in Yarmouth. What's the vibe there? Like, why do you think that happens in Yarmouth? What's going on down there?
Well, I don't know. Maybe there's not enough going on down there. Maybe somebody coming in town doing a show is like, they can't believe it. I don't know. We were just going to do a show there, and then it sold out really quickly. And so the promoter just said, "What if we do another night there?" So I said, "Why not?"
Yeah, that's awesome. Can't complain about that.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. I always love it, heading out to the East Coast. I've lived for over 30 years on the West Coast. I live in Vancouver. That's home for me. I came out here in the early 90s to do some stand-up and just never left, I just fell in love with the place. So anytime I can get out to the far coast, I always have a blast.
Do you find there's so I've been out to both coasts. I've been to both coasts myself too. And do you find there's like Vancouver's obviously bigger than the East Coast, but do you find there's like a similar vibe on the coasts?
There's a certain laid-backness. I don't know what it is about being on the coast. It seems like it's almost a universal constant, right? If you're on the coast, you're going to have a laid-back population with a lot of gang trouble. That seems to be the recipe, right? So I don't know what it is. I don't know if those two things are related. I don't know to what degree you got gang problems out on the East Coast. I'm not hip to the scene, but anytime you get ports, right? You get stuff coming in, you get shenanigans happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, I don't know what it is, but being near water, I think water is naturally kind of calming when it's not being a raging tempest. Yeah, the rest of the time, it's a pretty calming effect.
Perhaps because you mentioned the raging tempest thing, maybe that's part of it, because we know that, we get hit with storms and hurricanes and that sort of activity. So when it's calm, maybe it's a little extra calm.
Yeah, the calm between the storms, as they say.
Yeah, there we go.
Now here in Vancouver, we got the benefit of sort of between Vancouver and Vancouver Island. Like Vancouver Island is really the buffer for Vancouver. It takes the abuse. It takes the weather abuse, and then we have the Georgia Strait. So it's all we rarely get the big crazy. We get torrential rains, but we don't really get the same kind of storm activity that the other coasts do.
Okay, interesting. So Victoria takes the brunt of it, probably.
Yeah, Vancouver Island takes the brunt of it. Like the west coast of Vancouver Island takes the brunt of it. Okay. And then there's the Strait, and then there's the mainland where I live.
Okay, cool. So obviously a lot of my listeners will know you from Corner Gas. That kind of goes without saying. But I know you've been in stand-up for, I mean, what, 4 or 5 decades at this point?
Yeah, coming up close to 4 decades. I started in '88, so I guess in a couple years it will be my 40th anniversary of being a greasy nightclub comedian.
That's incredible. And did you started in Saskatchewan? Like I know you're from Tisdale, but did you started kind of in the Saskatoon scene?
Yeah, there was a club in Saskatoon. Like there was no place to do it in my hometown. Although the first time I ever did stand-up was in my hometown, like in high school at a variety night, drama night. Mm-hmm. I did it twice in high school, and it went well enough that I was encouraged to keep continuing efforts. And so in Saskatoon, there was a club that had an amateur night on Thursday nights, a comedy club. And I phoned down. I worked up the courage and phoned down, signed up for a spot, and went down. That was, like I said, February of '88 was my first time performing stand-up in front of strangers who had paid to hear comedy.
And can you remember the reaction?
Yeah, it's one of the best shows I've ever had. That first show was like just fireworks. It went off. It couldn't have gone any better. And then the second and third were much more realistic. But it's not an uncommon story. If you talk to comedians, a lot of them will say their very first show up was fantastic. And then you come crashing down to earth and you try to do it the next week and the next week. And you start to see that it's, maybe there was a bit of beginner luck or a certain nervous energy that the crowd picked up on and they got on your side or whatever. So it's not an uncommon story, but that's certainly what it was for me. That first show, it was like I said, amateur night. You're supposed to do a 5-minute spot. I think I did way too long. I think I did 10, 12 minutes and then got called up for an encore.
Wow.
Which doesn't happen on an amateur night at a comedy club. So I was like, oh, this is easy. This is going to be fun. And then the next week was more of a gut punch. And then it's like, this is not going to be like this every time. Okay.
Now, is that partly because you were trying to replicate your first set instead of like adjusting to the audience? Or is that even part of the game?
It is part of the game, and I was too new to really understand what was involved. That's one of the things about comedy. I mean, it's one of the things about a lot of things, I think. You can't really learn any other way than by doing it. You got to go out and take it in the teeth a few times, Mm-hmm. And, you can be taught a few I always say anything you can be taught about stand-up, you can be taught in 5 minutes. The rest, you got to go out and do it a million times, fall on your face a bunch of times, and you learn each time that happens. And so I'm not sure why the second one, it's not the second one was terrible. It was just that it was, okay. It was like what you would expect an amateur comedian to get. But it was such a big letdown from that first one. So
okay.
I don't know why, I was too green to fully appreciate or analyze why it happened. So it's anybody's guess.
Okay, cool. I mean, it's kind of an inevitable learning experience, though, I suppose. You mentioned 5 minutes. I just thinking about the passage of time, like when you're in the zone and nailing it, 5 minutes must go by in the blink of an eye. But if you're bombing the first couple jokes, 5 minutes must feel like an eternity. I have a hard time understanding or even imagining what that dichotomy feels like.
Yeah, it's context. It's all context. It's all what is happening. That applies to anything, right? If it's a lovely breezy day and you're walking home for 10 minutes, it seems like nothing. And if it's a lashing rain and hail, but yeah, it's definitely like bombing is a uniquely horrendous experience. I don't think there's anything like it. I mean, some sort of physical beating is probably worse, but listen, I've had both happen to me, and I'm not so sure I wouldn't take the physical beating again over. But here, the thing about bombing is, if it goes poorly enough, it becomes entertaining in and of itself. There's a tipping point where it's terrible for a while, but if it's legitimately going bad enough that that it becomes unreasonable, that becomes entertaining to me. I've had shows that I very much enjoyed where it went so badly that granted I'm the only one in the room who's enjoying it, but it can be its own enjoyable experience.
Do you have to fight the impulse to kind of speed up your set or cut out jokes like when you're bombing?
If you get over that tipping point, you start to wallow in it. You start to you talk about how bad it's going.
Okay.
And it's funny how that can sometimes turn it around too. It's like in life, if there's a problem, the best way to deal with the problem is, first of all, acknowledge that there's a problem. How can you solve a problem if you're not acknowledging it exists? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the best thing is to just stop and go, wow, this is not going the way I anticipated it would go. And I think as long as, it maintains, it continues to be mentally healthy, as long as you're usually doing well. If the bombing is an anomaly, then, like you did well last night, you'll probably do well again tomorrow. I can just live in this pocket of misery for the next 30 minutes or however long you're doing. If you start stringing together 10 bad shows in a row, you start to wonder, maybe I need to go back to school.
Yep. Okay, got it. And I'm sure there's those moments where halfway through a bombed set or a bombing, you bring the crowd back on your side. So that must feel pretty good.
Yeah. And conversely, there have been times, and this is when it's really strange, when it's going well for a while, and then inexplicably the laughs stop. And sometimes you can put your finger on it. Sometimes you can say, "Oh, I said the wrong thing. I pissed the people off," or whatever. But sometimes you have no clue, and people have just stopped laughing. That's when it's weird. I've had that a couple times that I can think of, where it was, the first 15 minutes going great, and then just for whatever reason, it just dries up. Huh. And it's the weirdest thing. But that's one of the things I love about comedy, is there are so many unpredictable variables. And every time you're standing in the wing waiting to be introduced, and you're going to walk out in front of a new group of a few hundred people, like that dynamic has never existed before. That when you get 500 individuals clumped together, that creates a brand new animal that you've never experienced before. What's it going to like? What's it going to hate? And it's on you to go out and discover what they want, what they don't like. How can I get this new entity that has never existed before? Because these 500 or 600 people have never come together before. How can I get them to roll over and show me their belly? Right? That's the fun. That's sort of the fun experiment of it all. And it's sort of that combination of art and craft. That's where the sweet spot lives. I love it. Even after all these years, almost 40 years, it's still my favorite thing to do.
Cool. Does getting to town a little early so you kind of wander around, does that help set up what you're talking about?
It can, for sure. You don't always get the time to do that. But
yeah.
Like I just did a show. It was a fundraising show in a tiny little town in Manitoba. And I got in town, I had some time, and I drove around and just saw like a couple of odd business names and a couple sort of quirky little things on Main Street that struck me as odd. And I made mental note of them and went back to my hotel room, wrote some stuff down, opened with that night, and went over gangbusters. It was great because people like that. If they feel like they're not just getting the same, recorded material that you've done by rote for the last 3 weeks. If it becomes a little personal, it really helps. And I learned that lesson early on. When I first started doing stand-up, I was doing, you have your act and you do it in a certain order and it's all very sort of regimented and it works. But what I found was there were times when I was sort of coming to on stage halfway through my act because I hadn't been paying attention, because I've done this so many times in this order. Like when you're driving down the highway and you come to and you're like, geez, I have no memory of the last 20 miles. That's sort of what it was like for me. I was like, man, I don't even know what I was talking about the last 10 minutes. I mean, I know, because it's just, I was doing it by rote. And I felt like that was shortchanging people. And also I was shortchanging myself. It wasn't that fun. Like stand-up should be fun. And it was fun when I first started. But, a year into it, I found myself going by rote. And I just said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. I'll decide what I'm going to open with. The first 1 or 2 minutes is going to be, and after that, I'm going to start pulling from my tickle trunk based on how it's going. And that's fun, and it keeps you present, and it keeps the mind engaged. You're like, what am I going to do next? How do I get from this? I want to do that bit next. How do I get from this bit to that bit? There's no natural bridge. How do I get there? And your mind is present, and the people can tell you're present, and it keeps them present, and it's a much better live thing. So I've been doing it that way, for the last 38 years, 37 years, where it's like, I know how I'm going to start, and now let's see how this goes. And that's not to say I'm not trying to sell you on the idea that I'm just making stuff up. It's, for the most part, it's stuff that it's existing bits that I know that I've done before, but they're just sort of in a big tickle trunk, got to be Canadian to get that reference, but and then you start pulling based on what the particular situation you're in is.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm a musician first, so I revert back to thinking of a songwriter, reading the room and changing the set list or changing the songs, depending on some of the feedback they're getting from the audience. It's probably similar.
Yeah, it makes it personal, makes it present, and there's an authenticity to it. I mean, people, they know when they're being, for the most part, people know when they're being sold something, when they're being, if somebody's going through the motions or if it's authentic, they can tell.
That makes me think of a quote I read from you. I think this is the quote, that the enemy of comedy is conspicuous effort.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like related to what we're talking about?
Well, it's just the idea is like, you want to hide the work that's involved. You want to make it seem natural. You want to make it seem like, even though if I'm doing a bit I've done 1,000 times, I still want to make it seem like this is the first time I've ever said these words. And it's better if it comes off effortless. When people start seeing the effort, what they start seeing is the contrivance. You want to sort of hide the contrivance. You don't, you want to be the Wizard of Oz. You don't want to be the guy behind the curtain, right? So when they start seeing you trying, that's when the wheels start coming off.
Okay. Trying in the sense of like trying to appease them, or just like you're trying to impress them?
It could be that. It could be like, sometimes if I'm in the middle of a bit and I'm, I bite my tongue or I stumble on a phrase, I won't go back and try and do the phrase, perfectly, like redo the same phrase, because it sort of shows like, oh, that's a thing that you do a bunch of times and you stumbled on it this time, you're going back and doing it again. I would rather just try and move ahead with, create different phrasing or something, because you don't want it to seem like this is a job. The moment the crowd feels like this is a job to you, there's a disconnect. There's like, it creates a natural sort of, oh, he doesn't want to be here, or, it's as long as, if you're having fun, the odds of them having fun are, exponentially greater. The minute it looks like work, that's not to, in that context, effort might have been the wrong word to use, because, and you're quoting me properly, that is the word I used, but now that I'm talking it through more, effort may have been the wrong word, because people don't mind seeing effort. They just don't want it to feel like they're watching you work. If they feel like they're watching you do something you don't want to do, or something you've done a million times, it loses the connection, the magic.
Yeah, I think I get it. I think it, again, going back to music, just for my mind, is, the difference between a band who shows up and plays it note for note perfectly that you hear on the record, versus a band who like mixes things up and improvs a little bit here and there and kind of like lives in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about creating this moment. And, we've sort of created this society now where everybody's trying to record everything all the time, and not, people sometimes miss out on great moments because they're so busy recording it on their phone or whatever. But that recording is never going to have what that moment had in real life, in real time. And so I think it's important that people relearn how to live in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Do you have like a phone? Like, do you allow people to take videos and pictures of your sets, or do you prefer when the venue, I don't know if police is the right word, but if the venue kind of suggests that phones are kept away?
There's no recording allowed of any kind, audio or video recording. But people can take still photos with no flash. I don't care about that, but no recording of any kind. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It does. I agree. It affects the mood just seeing other people trying to take videos and live outside of the moment. So
yeah, but also with comedy, part of comedy is surprise. You're creating an expectation with your setup, and then you put a twist to it, and that's why you're the comedian. Is you're supposed to give them something they could. So surprise is an element of it. And if people start recording you and uploading you, I've had this happen to me. People will upload a 10-minute set of mine, and I'm like, well, I didn't allow for that to be uploaded as your content. Maybe I didn't want to share those bits. Maybe that was just for us in the room that night. And there is, from a legal standpoint, there's, if I'm out in the park doing my stand-up set in the public, then I don't have control over it. But that's why that's one of the reasons I don't do stand-up in the park.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
High noon in the public park, that'd be the best time to do stand-up. Best environment.
Yeah. Well, right outside the Imperial is the park, so you could do a little warm-up set.
Yeah, I'll do a matinee.
Matinee in the park. Another interesting thing here, I heard you talk about thinking about the process, is I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, but I think you were talking about kind of beginners or people starting to write where they have this idea in their head, and in their idea it's perfect. But they're scared to put it on the paper because then maybe the holes or the problems or the trouble will show themselves. But then you said something like the whole point of writing something down is to be able to fix it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in writing crap. I don't really worry about writing, perfect stuff. Because people say to me sometimes, they go, what's the first step in writing a good script? I say, write a bad script. Step one is to write a script that's no damn good, and then get to work on, you sort of don't know what's wrong with it until you get it down and you look at it. Like, you can't open the hood of a car that doesn't exist. So get it down there, and then it's not going to be great. Give yourself permission to write, something that's not good. You're not going to be the first person that's written something bad. That's happened. It happens more often than not. So don't be so afraid of that. Just get down and get it down and get to work fixing it. And often the process of writing something, you can only sort of be so good in your head. The process of actually putting it on paper, writing it onto your screen, the process of doing that gives you a level of focus you can't get otherwise. At least, speaking for myself, I can't get it otherwise. I always say that I have a difficult time writing outside of writing. Some people can. Some people can go for a walk and they plot out their thing, and I don't do that well. Every now and then something will hit me when I'm on a walk. I'll get some little bit of an epiphany about a plot twist or something, or a good phrase will come to me. But there's no substitute for, sort of rolling up your sleeves and getting into it. You can't contrive that level of focus outside of doing it. And so for me, I always just feel like just start writing, and you're going to come up with good stuff by writing. that you wouldn't have come up with otherwise, because you're actually doing it. You're not thinking about doing it. You're actually doing it. That creates a level of connection with the material that you can't get just by thinking about it. And when it's really going well, you're almost taking dictation. Your brain in that creative state, when you stop thinking and you just start creating, there are times it's magical. It feels like you're dictating. You're listening to what the character's saying and writing it down. And you're like a CSIS agent overhearing dialogue between two people, and you're just making notes. And so, I'm a big proponent of just write the garbage. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with writing garbage, and then make it better. And
then also some of it's getting it out of your system, I imagine, right? Being able to get it on paper, and if you don't like it, well, just move on to the next idea.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I think, like, for whatever reason, ever since I was a little kid, sometimes I get ideas that just swirl around in my head, and if I don't get them down, if I don't get it out, sometimes it's a drawing or a painting, like sometimes it's a visual thing. I remember this one time I had this image in my head of a blue apple on an orange background, and I don't know where it came from or why, but for like weeks I could just see it in my head all the time. And I just thought, if I don't paint this, I'm going to go mad. And I went down, I bought a canvas, and I painted a blue apple on an orange background, and I never thought of it again. And that's the way it is, like with a story or with a joke. You get it down to purge it. Otherwise, I'll go mad. It's all I can think about.
Yeah, purge it. That's, again, thinking about music, people will hang on to songs that they haven't released yet, and it just takes them a decade to release. You know what I mean? They could have put out 100 songs in the time it took them to put out 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no substitute for motion, for momentum, for doing it. For me anyway, like I said, I gotta be doing it in order to do my best at it. I have to be doing it. That just seems logical to me. I don't know how, you can sit and twiddle your thumbs and deep think about your book or your song or your play or whatever, but you're never going to get there until you start doing it. You're never going to get to the place you need to get to. And that's not to say don't think about it. In fact, like, the really good things are going to be in your mind. For me, that's always one of the high watermarks. When I'm reading a novel, I can tell that it's really in me when I'm in those times when I'm not reading it. If I'm thinking about it, I'm going down to the store to get milk, or, I'm down to the post office or something, and I find myself thinking about the characters and the situation they're in. That's when I'm like, oh man, this writer's really got me here.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I agree. That's cool. I wanted to ask you a question about if you still have Hawkins on your rider. Hawkins
Yes.
Cheesies. So Can you go off on Hawkins a little bit? Because I can kind of remember the first time my friend, I know we only got a couple minutes left here, but my friend introduced me to Hawkins, and it flipped a switch in my brain where okay, all other cheeses are dead to me, basically.
Yeah, it's just they're the king of the heap as far as I'm concerned. There's a consistency to it that you don't get with other quote unquote cheesies or cheese puffs or cheese wannabes. There's, that cornmeal texture, that crunch, so that substantial crunch.
Yeah.
And, that cheese powder, I imagine very high sodium content. I daren't look at the label. I just enjoy it. My mouth is watering as we're talking about it. Now, that's not to say I can't enjoy. I'm not as dogmatic as you.
Okay. Well,
I'll have other cheese puffs. I'll have, whatever comes out of the pipe. But if you just say to me, you can have any sort of style snack like that you want, there's only one answer. Mm-hmm. Hawkins Cheesies. And so there, I put it on my rider, my live show rider. Other comedians laugh because they say you have the most Canadian show rider, because it's Hawkins Cheesies and rye whiskey.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. That is pretty Canadian. I thought you were going to maybe say ketchup chips or like coffee crisps or something. Well, I've been wanting to interview someone from Hawkins. I've reached out to them. I haven't heard back. I don't know if you have an inside connection, but I'll shamelessly, if you do have an inside connection, let the Hawkins folks know.
No, not really. Not to any degree that I'm willing to exploit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Brent. Of course, you're in town here April 12th at the Imperial Theatre. Tickets are still available, so snag those for sure. That's April 12th here in St. John. It's still considered brand new, right? Like or maybe not brand new, but your debut album, Easily Distracted, came out, I guess, probably 10 months ago or something like that.
Yeah, it was my first comedy album. I like to put out an album every 37 years.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So a countdown's on for the sequel, and I know you got a Substack on the go too. Not exactly TV, which is a good place to check you out too. I would say, in my personal opinion. So, and of course, BrentButt.com for all the future tour dates and social media stuff.
Exactly. It's all out there.
It's all there for your consumption. All right. Thanks a lot, Brent. I really appreciate it, and hope you have a great trip out east here. Good time in Yarmouth, back to back, sold out show in Yarmouth. So that's exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Always a blast to get out to the East Coast. So nice talking with you.